Hi, this is Jordan Moorhead, and this is the Austin Real Estate Investing Podcast. Today, we've got another awesome guest, Jorge Canavati. He is the managing principal at ATX Capital, and he's going to tell us all about what he's up to here in Austin right now. Hey, Jorge, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Jordan. How
Yeah,
are you?
thank you so much for coming on here. I'm doing great here today.
Great. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Me too. Jorge, before we get started, most important question we ask here, what's your favorite restaurant in Austin?
That's a good one. And the first one that comes to mind is one that I go to a lot. It's not really a restaurant, but it's kind of a coffee place, Swedish Hill, off of close to Mopac, close to downtown. So just a uh, very nice coffee spot. I could probably go there twice a week. It's gonna be redeveloped, so if you want to try it, you probably have to get there sometime soon.
Oh, Swedish Hill Bakery is going to be redeveloped?
Swedish Hill Bakery. Yeah, it'll be that whole block is gonna be redeveloped.
Wow. So that's on 6th Street, correct? On West 6th?
That's right. That's right.
Okay, awesome. I've heard a lot about it, but I've not been, but now I've got a good reason to go.
Yeah, it's a good spot.
Cool. Jorge, can you just tell us who you are and how you're involved with real estate here in the Austin area?
Sure. I grew up with real estate. My family's been doing real estate for the last two generations. My grandfather he bought some properties down in Mexico originally, and that's kind of how my family got into real estate. We've done some developments, some investments, and just different kinds of investments within real estate. Me personally, I've been in the space for about the last 10 years since I've been here in Austin, and I've dabbled in kind of different strategies. I've been in on the investment side. I was working with a real estate private equity company here in Austin for a year. Then I moved on to work with a developer out of Houston who does multifamily development. And for the last 3 years, we've been working on ATX Capital, which is a company based here in Austin, where we specialize in land investments. So what we do is we look for properties in the Austin periphery that aren't quite ready to be developed, but that have near-term development potential. When I say near-term, I mean in the next 3 to 4 years. So we don't look for properties that are kind of out there in the middle of nowhere. That we're just acquiring speculatively. We buy properties very strategically where we know that perhaps it doesn't have the utilities that it needs today, but there's a very viable path to acquiring utilities for the next 2 or 3 years, or a property that doesn't have zoning in place where we reasonably expect that we'll be able to acquire the necessary zoning. And so that's the strategy that we've been focusing in. And it's basically a strategy where we're not really competing with developers, but more so complementing their business model, because we're buying basically raw land and turning that raw land into a shovel-ready site that we then look to sell to developers.
Okay. So when you say shovel-ready sites that you're selling to developers, are you selling subdivided, or are you just selling the whole plat?
Usually, it depends on the size of the property that we acquire, but usually we are subdividing. So we're usually buying anywhere between 30 to 100 acres. And so that usually involves some subdividing. So we look for properties that have commercial development potential, whether it's multifamily, built to rent, mixed use, retail, office, even industrial. But we don't target properties that only work for single family development. And so an important component of the properties that we look for, or an important characteristic, is having some kind of commercial frontage or frontage to a commercial road. And so we're usually subdividing into some retail, and then usually multifamily, and sometimes another use or not, depending on the size of the site.
Okay. So let's take a 30-acre site, for example. How many lots would that be subdivided into for your uses, typically?
For a 30-acre site, we would probably depending on the commercial frontage that the property has, but we'd probably leave some retail paths up front, and then maybe around 25 acres, uh, 20 to 25 acres for a multifamily or built for rent user. So we're not subdividing into tiny little pieces. We're more so subdividing into just for the uses that we need.
Okay, so it totally depends. It depends is really more the answer.
It totally depends. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I think everybody always wants a really clear answer, but sounds like with what you're doing, it just depends what the uses are going to be. How do you determine what the uses are going to be? So it sounds like there's varying uses the land could have. How do you
Yeah.
know what you want to aim for?
So there's different things that go into it, but the big ones are kind of, I mean, you can look at a property and kind of determine by its surrounding uses if the property is suited for retail, multifamily, or more of a like an industrial use. We target properties that have a like a multifamily vocation, but usually you also have to look at kind of what the city wants. The city usually they have either zoning plans or properties that are outside the city limits. The cities will still have a what they call a future land use map, and
Mhm.
so we try to look for properties that where the future land use map aligns with what we want to see in a property. So that's another component that kind of drives what you can do on these sites. Another thing is utilities. Multifamily, for example, is a use that has a high requirement for wastewater and water. And so you need certain utilities, certain utility capacity for that use that you may not need for a different use. And so you kind of have to look at all these different components and determine what a property is well suited for.
Okay. Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of it depends on what the city wants and needs. So they're using their zoning to kind of tell you what they want you to do with the land too.
So it depends on whether a city is, whether you're inside the city limits
Hmm.
of a municipality, or you can be outside of the city limits, but within their ETJ, which is their extraterritorial jurisdiction, which means that even though you're not within the city limits, you're in an area that the city has identified for future annexation, and so you still have to align yourself with what the city wants to see. Um, if you're outside city limits and you're outside ETJ, then you're only dealing with county requirements. You're still going to be in a county, and you're going to have to deal with county requirements, which are usually a lot less restrictive. But the issue is that it's harder to get utilities if you're outside of the city limits or of the ETJ. So it's kind of you get one but lose the other.
So on the utility front, I know that's a big concern for a lot of people building single family homes. Will commercial tenants use well and septic tanks if that's all that's available out there?
Some will, but most won't. Most
Okay.
won't. So you usually do need some kind of other uh, either connecting to the city's infrastructure, or you can do what's called a wastewater treatment plant. It's becoming more
Mhm.
common these days when it comes to because a lot of sites that we look at have water, but not wastewater. So we run into that scenario more than sites that have wastewater but don't have water, right? So we're usually having to solve for wastewater, and there's ways to get creative. Another kind of solution that's becoming more prevalent here in the Austin market are what's called municipal utility districts, where the developer kind of figures it out on its own. They build the infrastructure that the site needs,
Mhm.
um, and then get reimbursed through uh, tax through tax that is paid by the ultimate users
Mhm.
of the development, whether it's the home buyers or the users. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into it for sure.
Yeah, and those wastewater treatment plants, that's essentially just a sewer treatment plant, correct? Or sewage
Yeah,
treatment
that's
plant?
right. That's
And
right. It's bigger.
They're not cheap.
That's right.
Yeah.
They're not cheap, but if that's what enables you to develop 60, 70, or $80 million apartment project in a market where you think you can charge a certain amount of rents, then that cost may be justified.
Absolutely. There's always a number that works. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's absolutely always about the numbers. So Jorge, do you just invest in the Austin area, Central Texas?
Right now, we are fully focused in Austin. We have some properties in the Houston market as well that we kind of bought late 2010s. On the latter part of the last decade, but for the last 3 years and for the foreseeable future, we're focused here in Austin. It's such a, I mean, even though it's a small city when you compare it to Houston or Dallas, I mean, once you look at all the municipalities in and around Austin, like we're doing business in Dripping Springs, Georgetown. We have a site under contract now in Otto, and so there's a lot of different municipalities. I mean, there's a lot of options here before we need to kind of expand to a different market, and there's a lot of learning that goes into each municipality and each part of Austin. So you need a lot of like hyper localized knowledge in order to kind of know what you're doing with this strategy. And so it makes a lot more sense for us to specialize in one particular market. Because even in Austin, going from Dripping Springs to Georgetown to Hutto, you're dealing with different people with different requirements, with different neighbors, different history. And so there's even though you're in the Austin MSA, there are different markets within the MSA. And so we're just trying to stay focused in an area where we live, where we're close to, and kind of master this area before venturing out into other cities.
It makes sense. And Austin's just growing like crazy. So I don't think you're going to lose any opportunities just staying in town here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Jorge, I know you come from a real estate family and you've kind of been in real estate your whole life, but what kept you in real estate? What kind of attracted you to real estate and didn't make you want to go off and try something different? What was exciting about it for you?
It's a great question. I think part of what was exciting for me is the fact that real estate is very open-ended, and for someone with an entrepreneurial kind of mindset that likes to be creative, and in real estate you can really kind of carve your own path. So right now we're doing land investment because when we kind of sat down and discussed and looked at different strategies and tried a lot of different things within real estate, it's kind of the strategy that we identified makes sense right now, and where we see an opportunity right now, but that may change in 5 years, who knows. But it's an industry where you can kind of be creative and kind of carve your own path.
Yeah, there's so many, and I think that's the exciting thing, but also a hard thing about being in real estate too, is there are so many different objects and there's so many shiny objects. So you can do anything, but I think it's smart that, you sat down and you all picked, hey, we're going to work on land development rather than we're just going to do whatever comes up, because there's so many things that are going to come up.
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard to say no to all to the opportunities that come up, and it's happened. It's happened to us many times where we kind of go under contract on a site with a new strategy that sounds interesting. It's kind of up and coming, and we look into it, and at the end of the day, we end up spending hours and hours and hours, and usually when you don't have a lot of information on something, everything looks like a good opportunity. But then once you actually kind of start digging in, you start seeing the problems and why the grass isn't always greener. And so we've always kind of ended up come back to the same strategy that we know, and that we've kind of where we've developed the know-how that we have right now. And so but yeah, it takes discipline to kind of say no to different strategies and different ways that you think you're going to be able to make a lot of money in real estate, and kind of just stay focused and disciplined with one strategy.
Yeah, I think it's so hard to stay focused because it always feels like, oh, this is going to be the easy one, or this is going to be the easy strategy, and this is the strategy it's going to make me all this money with not so much work. But I think what you find the longer you work in real estate or invest in real estate, is how you really make money is just sticking with something for a longer period of time. I know people that have done well in every sector of real estate, but they've just picked it and they've stuck with it and gotten to be the best at it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah, it's hard to do. It's easier said than done, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jorge, so I know you've been working on land development here for a while. What did you do before that? Were you in real estate before this?
Yeah, so for the last 3 years, we've been working here in ATX Capital, which is very focused on this strategy of land investment. But before, I was working with the real estate developer out of Houston on multifamily projects. And then before that, I was with a real estate investment company here in Austin, more on the investment side. So my role was more so analyzing deals uh, from an LP investment standpoint.
Okay. So you were working for like a family office or a private equity fund that just did limited partner investments,
Exactly.
passive
Exactly.
investing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
With multifamily developers,
All multifamily.
mostly multifamily.
Okay. Then you worked for a multifamily developer out of Houston
Uh-huh.
too. So you've
Yeah,
got
so
some.
I think that's why a lot of the sites that we look for right now, we kind of look for that multifamily development potential because it's kind of the product type that we understand really well, and it's also where we have a lot of relationships in that space. So when we're looking at a property for as a potential acquisition, it's easy for us to understand what a multifamily developer wants to see in the property. Kind of look
Mhm.
3, 4 years into the future when we're going to be selling the property and see if it's something that that a multifamily developer is going to want to see.
Yeah, no, that's easy because you have that experience of knowing what they're looking for.
Exactly.
Cool. What's the biggest mistake you've made in real estate investing?
The biggest mistake I've made in real estate investment. So when we started out, when I started out, one of the mistakes that I kind of was a big lesson for me, and that I think something that we've been doing well over the last few years. But when we started out, to sum it up, the mistake is working with consultants, call it either architects or engineers or whatever kind of consultant that doesn't have direct experience with the product type that you want to develop or that you want to uh, work on. So, for example, when we started out, and this is part of the experience that I had as well. Was working on some office condominium developments,
Mm.
and we were working with architects and civil engineers that were very good, but they had never developed or worked on the specific product type that we were looking to develop, and so that made it very challenging. And so, kind of
Mhm.
what I do right now is always if I'm going to work with whether it's a planner, architect, engineer, whatever it is, I'm going to want to make sure that they have direct experience working on the specific product type as close as possible to what I'm trying to do, so that we're not reinventing the wheel. And the more we can avoid a scenario where we're reinventing the wheel, the better. And so that's kind of a lesson that I learned from now on. That I think that's something that today saves us a lot of time, whether it's with or attorneys or whatever it is. Just work with
Mhm.
someone that has a lot of experience doing something that's identical, if not very similar, to something that to what you want to do.
Yeah, I think it's so important working with any sort of professional. I've had that same experience, whether it's with the lender or a real estate agent or, like you said, contractor, lawyer, that people who are familiar with what you're trying to do make it so much easier because they've gone through the process multiple times and they know the shortcuts. They know how to get it done right and how to get it done fast. So
Yeah.
it
And
makes
and
such a difference.
if you ask any, nothing against them, right? But if you ask any architect or attorney or anything, they can you help me with this? They're always going to say yes, and
Mhm.
they're never going to tell you no. Actually, I think you should look for someone else who's better suited for that. They're always going to say yes, and they're going to tell you why they're the person for the job. And we kind of went with that, but now we learn our lesson. basically.
Yeah. So now you look for somebody, you say, hey, can you help me with this? And have you done it before?
Have you done it? Yeah, exactly. We've done that exact same thing
Multiple times, hopefully.
multiple times. Exactly.
Yeah. No,
And
I
that
understand.
today makes things very easy for us on a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll save you a lot of time and a lot of headache.
Mhm.
So Jorge, if you had to start over today in real estate investing or in the real estate investing sector, is there anything you'd do differently? Because you've had a pretty broad range of experience. You've done quite a few things.
Yeah. Anything I'd do differently?
Say you're 21 years old, starting over. Would you
Yeah.
do the same thing you've done today?
I mean, it kind of goes back to your question of what I like about real estate because everybody kind of carves their own path, and obviously the path that I took isn't the way that I kind of planned it. But um, if I if I would do it differently, I'm not sure. I mean, because along the way, I mean, the relationships you made and the kind of the lessons that you learned end up being very valuable. So I don't know if there's anything specifically that comes to mind that that I would have done differently.
So the time you spent doing what you did, you'd say is worth it, 100, and you do it over again.
I think so. I mean,
Okay.
probably.
No, I can understand that. I think it, like you said, the relationships made and the lessons learned are sometimes more than worth it.
Exactly. Exactly.
What are your long-term goals for real estate investing, and where do you see yourself going? It sounds like you've got a good model now. Are you going to stick with this for a while or for the foreseeable future?
Exactly. So we feel like we have a good model that's taken us kind of years to develop, and over the last couple of years we've been working on this same like buying and investing in land for a while,
Mhm.
but over the last 2 years we've really kind of like one focused on this specific strategy, but also narrowed down within land investment like what specific kind of sites we look for, what areas, um, and all that. And so we're at a point where it probably makes sense for us to stick to the same strategy. And
Mhm.
we're buying uh, two or three sites a year, which is kind of the pace where we want to be at. And so we're probably gonna yeah continue to do this for a while. Hopefully, continue to add sites because what we like about the strategy is that at the end of the day, what we're doing is buying and owning land in Austin, which is one of the fastest growing cities in the U.S. And and I mean, it's a strategy that requires some patience because you're not actively going in and leveraging and breaking ground and building, leasing, selling. It's a little bit more passive,
Mhm.
but if at the same time what we're doing is we're kind of growing a portfolio of Austin land, and
Mhm.
so we definitely want to continue to do that for a
So
while.
if you're buying 2 or 3 sites a year, what's the average hold period for your projects?
The average hold period is about 4 years.
4 years. So let's say if you buy 2 or 3 a year, well, you're about at the. Are you selling or developing 2 to 3 a year then too?
So right now we're at a stage where we're selling some
Mhm.
the remaining ones that we have in Houston mainly,
Mhm.
but in on our Austin sites, we're still in that phase where we're acquiring. So
Mhm.
on our first acquisitions, we haven't hit that 4 year mark, and so we may sell them before the 4 years or not, but we're kind of still in that phase where we're still building our portfolio. But to your point, we want to be in a position where we're in 2 or 3 years, we're every year disposing of 2 or 3 assets, assets a year.
Yeah, because that's how you create liquidity, right?
Yeah,
'Cause
that's
you need
that's how
to.
we uh, yeah make the returns when we sell the site.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Just trying to make sure I understood the business model correctly.
Yeah,
Do you have a favorite book you like to recommend, Jorge?
there's a book that I'm reading right now that it's on my bedside. It's called I don't know how popular it is, but it's called The Little Prince. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it. I can't tell you why or who wrote it. but I know I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's a book that I first read many years ago, probably in school. I don't remember, but it's a good book. Easy read to reread every once in a while.
What's the premise of the book?
It's hard to describe, but it's kind of a you'll just have to check it out by yourself. It's I don't know how to describe it, but it's kind of like keeping you aware of like the things that matter, that really matter in life. It's kind of like it's
Mhm.
kind of the purpose of it.
And if I'm thinking of the right book, is it a book that essentially is teaching a lesson by telling a story?
Yeah, yeah, you could say that.
Yeah. So, okay. Absolutely. I'll have to check it out. I swear I've heard about it and somebody was raving about it, but I've not read it. So,
Yeah,
how long is the book?
it's pretty short. It's a short read.
Okay.
It's
Have you read Who Moved My Cheese?
yeah, I have.
Great. Is it similar to that?
No, not at all.
No.
Not at
Okay. Now I really need to check it out.
yeah. Yeah, you should check it out.
All right. The Little
Let me
Prince.
know. Let me know whether you like it or not.
Absolutely. Jorge, how can people best get a hold of you?
LinkedIn. I'm active on LinkedIn. Uh, yeah, they can look me up on LinkedIn. It should be a message, and I'm pretty good about replying there.
Okay. So LinkedIn's best spot. And I assume it's just your name on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So Jorge Canavati on LinkedIn, best spot to reach you.
That's right. I can also give out my email for anybody that's been interested in sending an email.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It's JCQ. So that's my initials,
Mhm.
JCQ at atxcapital.com.
All right. Nice and easy. JCQ at atxcapital.com. Jorge, thank
Perfect.
you so much for coming on here today. I really appreciate you telling us your story and about the strategies that you're pursuing here in Austin.
Thank you, Jordan. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you again, and we'll talk here soon.
Sounds good. Have a good one.